Hi everyone, welcome back. Today is such an exciting video because we are trying a new color corrector. I have the new Kosas Revealer Extra Bright Serum Powered Color Corrector, and I have not tried these. I swatched them a few days ago when I got them in the mail, but I haven't actually applied them. So I don't know anything about them yet other than what I've read online, but I have two shades here. I have the lightest shade and the second lightest shade. If you're familiar with my content, I love color correctors. I've done so many videos on my channel on different correctors that have been released, and we're gonna do a dedicated video to these. I'm so excited. And then at the end, we will do what I typically do in these videos, which is compare to other correctors that are on the market that I do own. So we'll talk about Caliray, we'll talk about Tarte, we'll talk about Huda, and I'll give you all the info. And if you're new here, my name is Blair. I would love for you to subscribe. I do all kinds of beauty content here on my channel, but I do really enjoy talking about color correcting the face and the under eyes in particular. I think it's one of the most powerful things that you can do to transform how your makeup looks. So I would love for you to stick around and subscribe, but let's just get started with the video. Let's get right into it. So as I said, these are new from Kosas. These are the Revealer Extra Bright Serum Powered Color Correctors. They do come in 5 shades. I have 2 of the shades here. So I have the lightest shade, which is Magic, and the second lightest shade, which is Illusion. One is more pink, one is more peach. I'm going to talk about why you would choose peach over pink or vice versa and everything in between in this video. I was so excited to see a new color corrector launch because we don't see these that often. Caliray, I want to say, came out around this time last year, and this is one of the best color correctors on the market in my opinion. So I am very interested to see how this will compare to the new Kosas corrector. Now, some of the just specific things I saw online about these Kosas correctors is they come in 5 shades, as I said, and these online are saying they are full coverage correctors. So basically, this is supposed to cover all the darkness. Whereas Caliray, this is a much lighter coverage option. It's very thin, lightweight, very hydrating. This one has caffeine, and it's supposed to be depuffing as well. Now, I am not someone that suffers with puffiness, but I have everything else. So I do feel that I can give a pretty good review of a corrector because I don't have perfect skin. You can see I have darkness right here. I have a lot of blue and a lot of purple right here in my inner corner. I have like a blue vein that you can really see on this side that kind of goes up the side of my face there. And then I also have some melasma right here. I have a little bit right here, and then I have a little bit right here on the same side. All right, I just applied a little bit of my foundation. I just used this Chanel one today, and then that's all I have on my skin. Now, I did not bring any foundation in this area. I never put foundation there, especially if you're someone that color corrects and you're gonna put color corrector and concealer under the eyes. I would not personally apply any foundation there because that's just another layer of product that you don't really need because, like I said, you're gonna use a corrector and then most likely a little bit of concealer. So I don't have anything there, but you can still see the melasma, the darkness, all of that. Now let's swatch these and talk about the colors. So we'll start with the lightest shade, which is called Magic. So this is what it looks like. The tube looks pretty similar to the Revealer concealer from Kosas. But let's swatch these. Now, this is the lightest shade, and it's called Magic. Now, this is a true pink, which personally makes me happy because that is hard to find in a color corrector. The only other true pink that I've ever seen is the Huda in Cherry Blossom, which I'll swatch in a minute. But this is the shade Magic, so that is a true pink, but it is not a super light white looking pink. That's typically what you see with most correctors, just in my experience. Something like this Makeup Forever, and this, the color is 0.1. I think it's called like Rose or something, but I'll show you the difference between these two and you'll really see. Do you see the difference there? That is a true pink corrector. This from Makeup Forever has like a, I guess you could say like a slight beigey pink undertone, but that on my under eyes looks almost white. That's not giving you any color correcting properties. So something like this from Kosas that has more pigment in it, more pigment than white, that is gonna actually color correct. So that's one thing I noticed right away with these is I do think all the shades, there are 5 shades, they are all true color correcting shades. I wouldn't really call them brighteners. And then we have the second shade, which is Illusion. And this one is a totally different undertone. This one is much more of a peachy tone. So this one here is Illusion from Kosas. So that one is obviously more of a peach. You have Makeup Forever there, and I think it's called 0.1. I think it's called Rose, and then Kosas Magic is on the bottom. But for me personally, I like to see something that's a true pink if you're wanting to color correct, because if you have darkness like me, so I have blue and purple here, if I were to apply something like this just alone on my under eyes, it might appear initially, oh yeah, it's brighter. It's not gonna color correct though. It's gonna brighten, but the darkness underneath is gonna peek through. And the reason for that is because you're applying something that's light over something that's much darker. So the darkness is gonna cast through. So in my opinion, something like this, unless you are very, very, very fair and you don't have blue, purple, any type of discoloration under the eyes, this is not going to do much for most people except add some brightness if you don't have severe darkness under the eyes. So this, in my opinion, is not a true color correcting shade. Now, let's go ahead and apply. We'll do one on each side. We'll start with Kosas in Magic. Now, the texture of this, just feeling it on the back of my hand, is very similar, if not identical, to the Revealer Concealer from Kosas. So if you like that texture, you might like this. But let's apply. So we're gonna start with the lightest shade, and we'll apply this one on my left eye here. So I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna take a little bit of it out here where I have this vein and also have some melasma right there. But I'm not gonna add more than that. Typically with color correctors, you wanna apply as little as possible, and you only wanna apply them in these places where you have the discoloration. Otherwise, you've got, you know, a pigmented color corrector in places that didn't even need corrector to begin with. So I like to use something that's on the smaller side to blend. This is the N16 from BK Beauty and Nikki LaRose. And I'm just gonna start tapping this in. I'm gonna bring a little bit right here in this inner part of my eye. Most people typically do get a little bit of darkness there, and I definitely do. And then I'm just gonna lightly start blending in this outer portion. But I'm trying not to spread it everywhere because, like I said, I don't need it everywhere. So it does look like this one is pretty pigmented, which is good if you have a lot of discoloration. If you don't, then you might not need something this pigmented. So there is just Magic on that side. So there's a definite pink, almost lilac hue to it under my eyes, which is really interesting. I've actually never seen that because even the corrector I was talking about earlier, the Huda Cherry Blossom, which let's just swatch this one as well so you can see. We'll swatch this next to this one. So we have Huda and Cherry Blossom right here. This is Kosas in Magic right here. So Kosas almost has like a little bit of a lavender hue to it, whereas the Huda and Cherry Blossom is definitely more pink, like a salmony pink. So it's almost like this one has a little bit more white in it a little bit more blue and a little bit more white maybe. So the color is definitely interesting. I could not get away with this on its own because it looks kind of odd because of that purple pink hue. However, I would be very curious to see how that would conceal darkness with concealer over the top. So we're gonna do that in a second. I can typically get away with a pink or a peach. I usually kind of prefer like a peachy pink if I were choosing for myself, but I can typically get away with either one. But let's go ahead and do Illusion on the other side and we'll see what we think. It definitely is very pigmented though, I will say that. So you don't need a lot of this. So I'm gonna start there and I'm gonna start with just kind of the same amount because it really did cover quite a bit with very little product. I'm actually gonna switch brushes to another brush that I really like for color corrector. I'm just kind of wiping it off here. But this brush or any small eyeshadow brush that you have is also great for color correcting under the eye because they're much smaller, more precise brushes. And like I said, you don't want to get color corrector in areas that doesn't need it. So the only way to really do that is to make sure you're not applying too much product and you're not using a brush that's too big. Because the bigger the brush, the more the product is going to have a tendency to kind of spread out. And then you've got it in areas where you really didn't need it to begin with. So I'm going to do the same thing here and bring a little bit of this in this inner corner. And this, I don't think I even said what brush this is. This is a MAC 217 brush. So I'm kind of tapping here. I have much more of that melasma on this eye. So I'm just kind of tapping it right here. All right, so we've got Illusion on this side and we've got Magic on this side. So you can see very big difference in tone there, in the brightness. That shade is the lightest and it has that pinky lavender undertone. I will say, I don't know that I'm a huge fan of that color. I think it's a little too purpley or something. I love a pink. I love Cherry Blossom from Huda, but I do think that one has, I don't know, I think it has a little bit too much either blue or white in it, or maybe both. I'm not sure. Illusion is this side over here. Now this is obviously much closer to my skin tone, and this, in my opinion, is probably going to do a better job of correcting darkness than this, because this shade is much closer to my actual darkness color or my melasma color. This is not. It's a little bit lighter. It's more that blue lavender kind of hue. So I'm guessing this one's gonna look better with concealer over the top, but you know, we're gonna apply both and we'll see. I do actually think this is a pretty full coverage corrector. Of the ones that I've tried, I do think this one has a lot of pigment. So I do actually agree with the fact that they're saying it's more on the full coverage side. Seems to be true. So let's apply some concealer. We'll do Kosas since this is a Kosas video. This is the Revealer Concealer in 2.6C, which is a cooler undertone, or they call it a cooler undertone. I would say it's more on the neutral side, but it's one of the newer shades from Kosas. So I'm gonna do a little bit of concealer there and a little bit right here. I do also think this side with Magic, the lighter one, because it has that kind of blue lavender hue, it's going to be a little bit harder to cover that side than it is this side, but we'll see. We'll start with the Magic side, and I'm just going to start tapping that concealer in over the corrector. So there it is with a little bit of 2.6C over the top. Definitely took down the kind of lavender hue there. I do think there's still like a slight lavender hue. Let's try adding just a little bit more concealer. A lot of color correcting, in my experience, is trial and error. You kind of have to experiment with things. because what works for you is really going to be individualized to you and your skin tone and your under eyes or your whatever discoloration you have anywhere on your face. Everyone is going to be different, and sometimes you just kind of have to try things out. And color correcting can be very confusing. That's another reason I like to make these videos, because I think sometimes seeing them applied on someone else can be helpful. So there's a little bit more. I definitely have a brightness to this under eye, but I can't tell if we're still getting too much of that blue lavender hue. Anyway, let's just blend the other side. Gonna add a little bit more here like we did on the first eye. Something else I didn't mention earlier before we applied these is make sure anytime you apply anything under your eyes, this is true, but especially if you're going to use a color corrector and then use a concealer, make sure you have really prepped your under eyes with something like an eye cream, a moisturizer, an eye balm. Today I use this one. I use this quite a bit from Refi. It's just a clear eye balm. So it looks like this. And it's just very cooling, it's hydrating, and it's a really good way to prep your under eyes for makeup. So there are both eyes with the same concealer. In my opinion, this side with Illusion, which is the second shade, and then the concealer on top, this side looks more natural to me. This side, at first glance, yeah, it does look a little bit brighter because that pink shade is a lighter shade, but I still think it has a little bit of an unnatural like hue to it. It doesn't blend as seamlessly into the rest of my face as this one does. In the future, what I would probably do and what I would recommend is if you are around my skin tone, you have blue, purple under the eyes, maybe some melasma, I would probably go for the second one, so the one we applied on this side, but just use a more bright concealer over the top. The concealer that I have from Kosas, this is not a brightening shade on me. This is very similar to my skin tone. So if you want that bright under eye, but you do have discoloration, I would recommend matching the discoloration with your color corrector, as in not going too light, going as dark as you need to match the depth of whatever you're trying to cover, and then use a lighter concealer as opposed to using something that's lighter to start out with and then using a concealer over the top. It's going to work better if you match the darkness and then add a bright concealer instead of the other way around. Hopefully that makes sense. A few thoughts on color correctors as well that I want to share. Number one, not everyone needs a color corrector. It's definitely something that can make a big difference if, say, you always apply your makeup, you apply your concealer, you look at your under eyes and you feel like whatever discoloration you have is peeking through, the concealer is not enough, then you might benefit from a color corrector. But if you're someone that has just like a little bit of a hint of some blue or some purple or some green or brown, whatever it is, typically a concealer on its own is going to work to cover that up. So don't assume that you need a color corrector. This is not a product that I would say, oh yeah, everyone needs to run out and get, because a lot of people don't need color corrector. And number two is, for me, in terms of just my experience, and I'm not a makeup artist, this is just my experience applying these things on myself for a few years. It's always better to go a little bit darker in a color corrector than it is to go too light. Because like I said, if you go light and you have, pretty decent darkness or discoloration, most likely you apply something lighter over the top, that darkness is going to show right through. Yeah, it might give you like a brightened effect kind of instantly just from applying something that's lighter under the eye. but the darkness is going to peek through that light color. So it's always better to apply something that's closer in terms of whatever your discoloration is. You want to match that with your corrector and then brighten with something that's lighter. That's just what I've seen work the best on myself, and I've been doing this and applying these things on myself for quite a while. Now, something else that I do think this might be useful for, and this is probably what I'll end up using this light shade for in Magic, is say you have a concealer that is too yellow, which honestly that happens to me all the time. I think a lot of brands nowadays they don't get undertones correct, and I think a lot of brands make concealers and call them neutral or even cool toned, and they are very warm. They have a lot of yellow, a lot of golden tones in them. This would be great for that because you could add a little bit of this with your concealer, mix them together, and it would kind of neutralize the tone most likely. So I think that would be a way to use this. I just don't know about this shade in terms of a color corrector. Even if you're lighter than me, I feel like it's got a little bit too much blue and white pigment in it. So in terms of choosing a color corrector, I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is your darkness or your discoloration showing through after you've applied your concealer or your foundation, whatever you're applying? If the answer is yes, then you might benefit from a color corrector, but what is your goal in the end? If you are looking to truly color correct, as in not see the pigment peek through, you want to go with something close to your discoloration and then add something brighter over the top if you want a brighter look under the eyes. Instead of going lighter right away, thinking that will automatically brighten, and it may look like that it may look like it does, but that darkness is always going to start to peek through. In terms of how they're sitting under my eyes, they both look really nice. I actually think it looks pretty hydrating under the eyes, those two mixed together, the concealer and the corrector. And they, like I said, they do have a lot of pigment. So again, I don't think this is going to be for someone that just has a little bit of darkness here and there. I would recommend this for somebody that has mid to significant discoloration on the face or under the eyes. But it's laying very nicely. I just personally think this side looks more natural than this side. This looks unnaturally bright to me, and it still looks a little bit blue lavender in my opinion. But again, I don't love a super bright under eye on myself, but I know a lot of people really do like that. So, you know, to each their own, but hopefully these demos help a little bit if you're trying to decide if this one is right for you and what color you might need. Okay, let's do a few more comparisons here to a few other color correctors. So I would also say that in terms of comparing to my other liquid correctors, so like the Caliray, the Huda, the Tarte, this Kosas one is definitely the most pigmented for sure. So if you're looking to really fully color correct or, you know, even out skin tone, balance an area, that one's really going to do it if you're looking for that. All right, one of my other absolute favorites is this one from Caliray. This is the Hideaway color corrector, and this one comes in 8 shades, which is fantastic. I do have the shade Cool Sunrise in this one, and this one is somewhat similar to Illusion from Kosas. So this is Cool Sunrise from Caliray, and this is Illusion from Kosas. Kosas actually has a little bit more, almost looks like it has a little bit more yellow in it. This one from Kosas has a lot more of a, like that peachy tone, but they're not super, super far off, but the tone is definitely slightly different there. Now, the Caliray, I don't know how well you will be able to see this here, but the Caliray, much thinner texture, not nearly as pigmented as the Kosas. And I would say, okay, you can probably see there. So that's Caliray there, and that's Kosas. You see how much more sheer that one looks when you blend it out than this one. So this is less coverage. It's a thinner texture, and I would say it's more hydrating. than the Kosas. I don't think the Kosas is drying, but it is a little bit of a thicker, kind of like a whipped texture like the concealer is. So it's definitely not as hydrating as some of these other correctors that I have here. And then let's compare to the Huda. So Huda, I actually have two different colors. I have Pink Pomelo and Cherry Blossom. Cherry Blossom was the shade they released last year, but this Pink Pomelo was one of the original shades. So there is Pink Pomelo from Huda. I would say this one kind of falls in between the Caliray and the Kosas in terms of the pigment level. It's, I would say, more pigmented than Caliray, but not quite as pigmented as the Kosas one. So I would say light coverage, Caliray, medium coverage, Huda. Kosas is that more full coverage. But a big con to the Huda one, and I hate this because this is a great product, but the Huda one, the packaging is not good. Do you see how messy this is? And it leaks constantly. I guess there's an issue with the stopper in there. I don't know, but after you've had this for a while, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So that stinks about the Huda one. And it does kind of deter me sometimes from using it, to be honest. And then we also have the Tarte Creaseless Corrector. Now these, I guess, also came out last year after the Caliray ones, I think. And in this shade, or this corrector, I have two shades. I have a lighter one, which is called Peachy Pink, which honestly, this is a pretty good shade, and it's very different from these others. And then I also have the second shade in that one, which is Peach. So we've got Magic there from Kosas, Peachy Pink from Tarte, and Peach from Tarte. So Peach from Tarte is most similar, I would say, probably honestly, to the Kosas and the Caliray. This one, Pink Pomelo from Huda, has a little bit more pink in it. It's a little bit more of like a salmon-y peach. This one is a little bit closer to Kosas and Caliray and Cool Sunrise, but Tarte and Caliray have a very similar, they're very similar in general. The coverage level, I would say, is a light coverage. They're very thin, very lightweight under the eye. The Tarte, I believe, only comes in 4 shades, 5 shades maybe, and I think one of those is a green shade, which typically use that on the face, not under the eyes. But those are very similar to the Caliray, so I would also categorize those in the light category. But you can see how different all of these are from Magic. I would say the most similar to Magic has to be Cherry Blossom from Huda, but as you saw earlier, it's actually not that similar. The Kosas one has a lot more of a lavender tone to it. So that is Huda in Cherry Blossom. Almost like it's like a pinky salmon color, where this one is just, I think it's just got too much white in it. And I think unless you used it as like a mixer, like I was saying earlier, I think that shade might be a little bit hard to use. All right, we're gonna do another experiment because I kind of want to try. Okay, I am gonna leave this side. So this is the side that we put Magic and then the Kosas concealer on top. I'm gonna remove this side that has Illusion and the concealer, and we're gonna reapply Illusion, but then use a little bit of a brighter concealer over the top and see how it compares to this side where we used the brighter corrector first and then a concealer that wasn't as bright, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. Okay, so I just removed it. I did reapply a little bit of my eye balm from Refi that I was talking about earlier, just because this is probably gonna irritate my under eyes a little bit, but I'm gonna reapply Illusion. I'm gonna use the same little MAC brush. And then we're gonna apply a brighter concealer. So I'm gonna apply this concealer right here. So that is a lot brighter than the one we applied earlier. This is Kosas in 2.6, and this is Makeup by Mario in 160. And we're gonna apply this over the top and see what we think about the two sides. So I'm gonna do some there and a little bit there, because this one is also very, very pigmented. Okay, I'm gonna use my Nikki LaRose brush again. I did kind of wipe it off. So there is the side with Illusion, and then the Makeup by Mario concealer, and then this one obviously had Magic with the Kosas concealer over the top. To me, this side looks much better. This side, I could live with that. Like, it doesn't look terrible. I just think it doesn't do as good of a job in terms of correcting the darkness. I think it does give a little bit of an overall brighter look, but like a really good way to test this is like, if you look here, do you see how this kind of has like a blue, it's like a blue kind of hollow shadow here? This side really doesn't. And the reason is because we went in with a darker corrector first and then used a lighter concealer, as opposed to the opposite, which is what we did over here. But again, a lot of this is going to be personal preference too. I know it's a very popular thing to have like the super like bright white under eye. I don't think it's as popular as it was a few years ago, but I know a lot of people really like that. For me personally, if my goal is to color correct and to make sure the darkness is not peeking through it all, I think this is the way to do it, but to each their own. But honestly, I mean, neither side looks bad, but I do think this side here with Illusion and then the brighter concealer looks a little bit better. I think you can really see this right here, that this side really doesn't have that like shadow, like hollow look here. It kind of like looks flat. And the reason it looks flat, again, is because we color corrected first, whereas this side doesn't look bad, but you can definitely see a little bit more of that hollow there, and it's definitely because of the color corrector we started with. All right, we're gonna do one more experiment here actually before we wrap up the video. I'm gonna remove this side. So this is the first eye that we did with the Magic first and then the Kosas concealer. And what I'm wanting to test here is something else that you could do with this Magic shade. I want to see how it does if you mix it with a concealer that's very yellow. See if it kind of neutralizes the color. I just purchased this. If you saw my last trying new makeup video, this is the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Lift and Flex Concealer in the shade 4. And this is supposed to be light with neutral undertones. It is so yellow, so yellow. So that's what it looks like there. I mean, doesn't that look yellow to you? That looks very yellow to me, not neutral. So something like this, I would love to see how mixing something like this in with it impacts the color. So I'm gonna take a little bit of the pink. I don't wanna do too much because we saw how pigmented it is and it has a lot of white in it. So I don't know if this is gonna totally overpower this Danessa Myricks concealer, but I figure we could try it just to see. Because when I used the Danessa Myricks for the first time, I actually really liked the way the concealer looked, but it was just so incredibly yellow that I definitely did not like the shade. So I definitely did tone down the yellow of that Danessa Myricks, which is kind of convenient because I was actually wondering how I was going to continue to use this because it's so yellow. So that's an option too. You could definitely use something like this as a mixer. If you tend to have that issue if things pull really warm or yellow on you, something like this would be helpful to mix in with things. Obviously, it's not ideal to have to buy a product to mix in with other things to fix them, but you know, if you wanted to or you have that issue a lot, maybe that would be an option. I think of the two sides, I still prefer this one with the darker corrector and then the lighter concealer, but this might be a helpful thing to have on hand. as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish the rest of my makeup, and then I'll be back and we will wrap up the video. All right, finished my makeup, and I just wanted to give some closing thoughts on this new corrector from Kosas. Do I think it's worth looking into? Yes, but only if you have a pretty significant amount of discoloration and you're okay with this being a fuller coverage product. If you just have a little bit of darkness, a little bit of something under the eyes, but it's nothing that you find constantly shows through your concealer or anything like that, you don't need a color corrector, and you definitely don't need one that's this full coverage. So only for those people that have medium to dark discoloration that shows through their other complexion products that you would like to cover. That is who I would recommend this formula for. Now, in terms of the shades, I will definitely continue using this one. So this is Indefinite, which is the second lightest shade. This is a good shade for me personally. I believe they say that this is good for light to medium skin tones, and I could see that. So I will definitely continue to use this. Of the two shades that I picked, I definitely prefer the Peachy one. And I'm kind of surprised by that because in the past, I've really enjoyed a pink color corrector. I really love Cherry Blossom from Huda Beauty. A while ago, I used this over everything else until the last year, the Caliray came out, and I just kind of went away from this one for a little bit. But typically, I do like something with a little bit more pink in it. However, the Magic color I do think is a little bit strange. I think it has a little too much white and a little too much blue. And it just has an overall kind of lavender hue to it, which might work, but I think on most skin tones that might look a little bit odd. Because to me, when I had this on this left side with the Kosas concealer on top, it did brighten a little bit, but you could definitely still see my blue purple discoloration. It definitely left a little bit of a cast. And I think that would be true for most skin tones with this color. And if you're even more fair than me, I think this is gonna look possibly a little bit dark on you, and still the undertone I'm not quite sure about. So I would probably pass on the Magic color just because I think for most skin tones this is going to be kind of hard to work with. But in terms of this color, I'm pretty impressed with this. I will definitely continue using it and give you updated thoughts. If that sounds like something that would work for you, if you want a full coverage, if you have a lot of discoloration, I do think this formula is nice. It is a little bit on the thicker side. It's much thicker actually than any of the other color correctors that I showed you. This is kind of more similar to a cream corrector in my opinion, but just with a doe foot applicator. So if you like something really thin, I would not direct you to this formula. However, thinner consistencies typically give you a little bit less coverage. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for in your under eyes. But I don't think this is drying by any means, but it's definitely not as hydrating as the Caliray or the Huda. So I hope this was helpful for you. I know this is probably a long video just on one product, but if you watch my other color corrector videos, you know that's typically how I do these. I like to go really in depth with it, really talk about it, swatch things, try things on, because I think that's the most helpful. So I hope this was helpful for you. And thank you so much for watching. I will list everything that's on my face. If you are curious about anything, I will link all the correctors that I talked about. I will link the new one from Kosas, all in the description box and for you in YouTube shopping as well. If you do shop through any of my links, I do make a commission that supports my channel. So thank you so much if you do that. And if you are new, I would love for you to subscribe and follow me over on Instagram at simply.blair and TikTok simply.blair1. And I will see you again very soon. Remember, simply be you.